All right, folks, we have a very special guest coming up. It's the one, the only, the infamous Vincent McDougal. Vincent is currently working at the White House with the Council for Environmental Protection. Vince, come on the show.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Good to see you. Vince. Vince, do you mind if I call you Vince?
That's fine with me. We're friends.
Okay. So, tell me, what are you doing?
Well, recently President Wellington has appointed me on his executive board for environmental planning. And the Council of Environmental Quality, it actually coordinates all the federal environmental efforts and works closely with agencies and the other White House departments. Okay. And we work on all these different environmental policies and initiatives throughout the globe. And I mean, the council started way back in 1969 as part of the National Environmental Policy Act, which started in 1969. Okay. And that act is still running strong today.
Okay, so you said you're a specialist, so tell me what you specialize in.
Well, I specialize in environmental plans and initiatives that disregard the influence of money, power, and social status in the country. Okay. For instance, back in actually 2002, General Motors heavily polluted the communities where its prime business operations were located. Mm-hmm. So with my own suggestions and coercion, we had legislation passed, the Pollution Responsibility Act of 2012, which outlawed any firm from multinationals to like mom and pop stores from polluting the environment. So Dirk, with today's technology, it's not that hard to avoid pollution. Like we have scrubbers and smokestacks of businesses where like they can avoid pollution, avoid deadly emissions. But the GM could not meet the quotas that we set for them, the pollution quotas. Yeah. So in essence, we had to shut down GM because they were breaking the law.
Well, they probably deserved it.
Yeah, so I like to put all these industries in equal playing fields, like whether they're big industries or small, you know, given the same rules.
All right. Well, Vince, I mean, why don't you tell me about your two proudest accomplishments?
Two proudest? I'd have to say the End of Oil Act of 2039.
All right, yeah. 2039.
Yeah.
That was
Oil is terrible.
And the Fair Workers Act. Well, the End of Oil Act of 2039, that basically set a limit on the amount of oil each person used for their personal use. By the year 2039, the amount for oil was $102 a barrel. So basically only the rich could afford that. And that just increased the inequality gap, the income gap between the rich and the poor, and that was really unfair because the poor were left with basically no energy source. So we made a limit, we set a quota on the amount of oil each person could use, and basically that forced everyone, the rich and the poor, to look to alternative sources of energy. And the Fair Workers Act passed through the UN, and it punished those corporations who exploited workers with unhealthy working conditions, and the firms who hired child labor, and those who polluted a lot. So outsourcing was basically eliminated because there's no longer child labor, no longer exploiting of workers. Mm-hmm. So companies were forced to better
it's our century telecast right now. And I know 100 years ago it was really difficult to pass a lot of the things that you've been able to help society with. And I'm wondering, did you run into any roadblocks as you were passing these?
Yeah, the main roadblocks was a lot of the CEOs were absolutely against all of my legislation because it obviously took away from their profits. But as you may or may not know, I don't like CEOs. I think they're just guys who sit behind big expensive desks.
Yeah, I'm down with that.
I think they're awesome. I'm not a big fan of them. So with the help of Vice President Ralph Cheney IV, he learned from his ancestors' problems. Remember Dick Cheney back in the Bush administration?
I'm actually not familiar, but keep going.
Around year 2000, 2005. Anyways, his ancestor made a huge problem with Halliburton. They were creating all these pollution problems, all this corruption, and he didn't want to make the same mistake twice. So he helped me pass all these laws. He's one of my good friends now.
Okay, well, that's great. Unfortunately, since the century is approaching, we're gonna have to cut you short. But Doc, it's been great. It's been great to have you on the show. I love it. And all right.
for by friends of Wellington Hardcastle who think he was sweet and should still be president. Again.
Okay, America, here it is, the moment you've been waiting for. We're about to speak to a man who has been coined as the greatest leader of this or any other planet. Unfortunately, he can't be here today, but we have him live via satellite from his Batcave. It's President Wellington Hardcastle. Let's hear it for him, folks. Let's hear it. Wellington Hardcastle. Mr. President, it is a great pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you, Scott. I'm sure it is.
And, sir, how's your dog Lincoln?
Oh, he's passed.
I'm very sorry to hear that.
That's perfectly all right. We're having him brought back to life.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, technology in the latter part of the 21st century is something. Now, as you know, we are producing somewhat of a look back at the 100 years to celebrate the new century. How would you say the political landscape has changed over the past 100 years?
You know, Scott, I was just pondering that very question while flying to my office here on my energy-efficient jetpack. Quite a bit has changed indeed. America found itself drowning in troubled waters after Emperor George Halliburton Bush IV left office in 2028. It was at that point that dissatisfaction with trends in the American political system reached an all-time high. Americans were no longer content with the corrupt nature of politicians in the system and the system that reinforced their mediocrity. During the neoconservative revolution, the gap between rich and poor grew too great, and the representation of the common man almost disappeared.
That's pretty disturbing to think about, but then of course, you know, the Sui Party came about.
Yes, the scholars of unparalleled intelligence changed everything. Over the next several decades, they underwent a complete overhaul of the American political system, combining proportional representation with the existing single-district plurality system.
Now, for those of us, you know, who are too young to know what you're talking about, what exactly did this change entail?
Well, before the 28th Constitutional Amendment, the representatives of both houses of Congress were elected by the winner-take-all elections in their particular district. This continues to be the case in the Senate. In the House of Representatives, however, the shift to proportional representation meant that the number of representatives elected would be relative to their percentage of the vote in a given election. In other words, say one political party receives 50% of the votes, another 30%, and another 10%. That figure will be represented as directly and accurately as possible in the House, rather than all of those seats going to one party.
And of course, that's something that helped third parties to emerge.
That's very right, Scott. Not to mention all but the end of negative campaigning, increased voter turnout, improved responsiveness to constituencies, and most importantly, more accurate representation of the electorate and government in general.